Hello and welcome. Given the recent growth of open-world online games featuring co-op, I thought it would be a good time to share my thoughts about this compelling design formula. Just to be clear right from the get-go, the same core concept can be applied to the other side of the paradigm. Just sandbox levels but no co-op, or just single player without open world. However, the two together create several unique challenges and therefore make the whole topic more interesting. I will try to keep things as broad as possible so this direction can apply to the widest range of games and settings, even though most of the ingredients make their home in a game like Far Cry. Alright, let's start with a 360-degree open world approach to a location for a group of friends. In the ideal case, they don't have to rely on UI markers of any kind and can use the environment itself to meet at a rally point, or to strategize around entering the space in case the scenario is a bit more tactical. To provide an example of what not to do, if all the landmarks or vantage points look the same, a clear communication isn't possible. Miscommunication at the beginning of the experience is, by definition, a bad start and should be avoided at all costs. Any open world location benefits from clear and unique pre-staging locations around its perimeter, not just for navigation itself, but also for clear communication in co-op. Now, everyone involved has a fair chance to see a clear picture and communicate effectively. In addition, the meeting points should be big enough for the supported number of players, so a one-person hunting blind is a bad idea in a 16-player co-op game. Ideally, teams discuss their plans from these vantage points, but that won't work if only one player can see the target. If possible, try to make the outside vantage points not too powerful. There's no reason to go into the location if you can already shoot everybody from the outside. Now our team is about to enter the space. Let's first look at the case where they decide to all take the same entrance. A few common level design mistakes can happen here. The first one is not to give enough room right after the entrance for all core players. The more players your game supports, the more opportunities have to be available, obviously. The second one is that a presented path at the start of the location leads one group of players too far away from the other ones. It separates them without establishing sidelines or close enough proximity. This is bad. Player fragmentation is the mother of all chaotic co-op sessions. Thirdly, do not unnecessarily block player sidelines when you want them to work as a team. If only one player can look ahead, you have nothing else than a leader and a pack of lemmings. Now, first of all, let's make sure when players enter an activity, they all have enough space. If we give all players enough options at the entrance and they are all within reasonable proximity, then they keep acting as a unit. Encourage them to stay together so they can see and communicate with each other by good object placement. From here, they can more or less see each other and execute their first action as a team, without stumbling over each other or fighting who goes first. Your layout should not introduce chaos and misdirection, especially right at the beginning. If we look at basic combat cover setups, then frontlines are an important topic. As much as possible, try not to arrange cover randomly such that AI and player have no comfortable and obvious way to orient themselves during combat. Do not set up frontlines in a strict linear fashion for a 360 open world activity. Alright, a clearly established frontline cover setup between AI and core players is important. But more important is to keep the open world aspect in mind. What I mean is that frontlines around an open world activity should resemble an onion, not lasagna. This gives multiple core players enough room all around with a good combat setup. However, size and forced linearity of your location can affect this direction case by case. And an important quick reminder, every good frontline setup includes flanking possibilities for both AI and players. Since I specifically mentioned outer vantage points, I guess you probably assumed it is only a matter of time till we talk about inner vantage points. Now that we're getting near the middle of the location, try not to use too much cover. We don't want players to become confused about where to proceed next. Structure your areas so they contain clear paths for the players to progress. Clear inner vantage points can be used to attract players and to plan the team's next steps. This is even more important if your game has a stealth element, since planning, executing and vanishing is the punchline for any good stealth game. And this is even more relevant in co-op. Without such gathering, regrouping and overview points within the space, players too quickly disperse and gameplay tends, once again, to become chaotic. A well-executed plan with friends feels very satisfying, while a chaotic wipe has a better chance to end friendships. Otherwise, the same rules for outside vantage points apply. This is another communication aspect of co-op open-world level design. Do not duplicate landmarks or build your location out of objects which are visually similar. Otherwise, it will just cause disorientation and cause communication screw-ups, especially in a more public co-op environment. For the sake of quick and easy communication, the bigger locations, areas and buildings within your activity must be distinguishable from each other. Another quick hint: depending on the size of your play space, you should consider having at least 3 landmarks for easy triangulation. For example, a single big tower in the middle is not enough to describe where you are as a player. Flow is an essential aspect of all level design layouts, but it is yet another design component whose importance in co-op is magnified. The answer is not to distribute bigger assets and more cover objects equally in the activity space. Players will have problems navigating and communicating their intentions. So, a clear separation between object clusters and open areas is even more important in open world co-op. Without such clarity, movement coordination as a team becomes unnecessarily hard. It is also terrible for frontlines and AI flow. And a quick important aside: do not judge cover density from the top. Go down in the camera of your game to make such assessments. Alright, plans go wrong more often than not, especially in co-op. The more players there are, the higher the chance for a screw-up, especially if your game has a stealth element. Everyone who has one of those special Leroy Jenkins friends knows what I'm talking about. What players then need is a way to at least partially reset the action and become the master of the situation once again. So, it sounds obvious, but we really can't overestimate the value of the player's option to reset the action. It is just as important to consider how they reset the action. It should never be by leaving the location or activity. Keep the players inside and make sure they have fun. This principle carries even more weight if the scenario is on the difficult side. This often devolves into frustration if all hell breaks loose. In those cases, it should be made easy for the players to retreat, reassess, and go back in again. Dying for the lack of options is rarely fun. When I talk about circular flow, then this is one of those rules which are not strictly for co-op, but I thought it makes sense to mention it here since every bad level design decision multiplies in co-op. So, do not restrict the player's movement in one direction for too long. Allow players to change their mind and react to developing dangers. Especially when you enter an activity or sandbox sub-area, provide flanking routes close to the entrance. Do not limit players by using routes which constrain them for too long. Effective routes give players options if and when the situation changes. Once again, it is very important to allow co-op groups to roam left and right when they enter an activity area. Otherwise, they have to move back out of the activity or commit too deep when they realize their mistake. Disclaimer: this doesn't conflict with the direction from split at entrances, because we're talking about a different scale between the two. Here we're talking about enough space to keep the group together and not fragmented. Alright, this is the first of 4 points focusing on AI, with particular value for co-op and/or games with stealth. And, as with many of the other guidelines, they're often valid in single player as well. When it comes to AI grouping, do not allow multiple AIs to see each other at the same time. Doing so makes it too hard or even impossible for multiple players to perform silent co-op kills or similar cooperative actions. AI units can still move, idle and patrol within an area, but killing them silently shouldn't immediately alert another member of the group. Taking out the entire squad in a coordinated attack is fundamental to co-op stealth gameplay. Additionally, groups of AI should be clearly separated from each other so players can identify them as groups. This is not only for the sake of communication, but also for basic stealth setup readability. If the groups are not well organized and separated, then you just have a big mess, and not a good core puzzle to solve. The next point is still related to AI groups, but now turns to the layout side of things. So, once again, do not restrict stealth by allowing groups of AI to have perfect sightlines on other AI groups. Instead, use line-of-sight blockers to facilitate player options for stealth. This means that in order to create such AI setups, you need areas which are clearly separated using visibility blockers. Otherwise, as expected, AI groups can see each other and all the basic co-op AI stealth setups won't work anymore. The walker puzzle is a classic in stealth games. A walker connects separate AI groups by patrolling between them. If you have too many walkers between groups, you create chaos instead of a solid stealth puzzle. Instead, ensure the timing pressure from the walker is readable enough so the players can decide to wait till he walks out of range or to take him out together with a group. Lastly, we have the Watcher. Essentially the static version of the walker, but instead of walking, he rotates and looks at AI groups separately. Again, too many Watchers cause the same problem as too many walkers, but can be even worse if too many of them can see each other. And this problem is magnified when the Watchers have a height advantage. Another problem can be that a Watcher is looking at too many groups at the same time, or when it isn't clear exactly where he is looking. Watchers are a potent ingredient to create a solvable puzzle. The number of them is key, but nothing is more important than the clarity and readability of what they're seeing at any given time. Alright, I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on open world co-op guidelines. I see this as a topic which will likely play an increasingly important role in the future. If you have any thoughts or questions, I would love to hear them in the comments. See you next time for more videos.